You can all be seated, thank you. Welcome to the fourth year oath-taking ceremony. I've just prepared 10 pages to speak because you're here for 1 hour, so I have to use the time. For those that don't know, I'm Rian from the department, and I will be leading the program today, so it will be short and sweet. Before we start, students, in your envelopes, if you haven't opened it yet, please be careful when you open it. Your HPCSA certificate is in there. It's the original. There's no other one. Don't lose it. There's no copies. If you want a copy, you phone Pretoria, right? Okay? They will help you. So I've said it in public. It's on recording. It's on YouTube. I will pull the file. But before we go any further, I would like to call Mrs. Williams to do the welcoming.
Thank you so much, Dr. van der Venter. So good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you here to our second fourth year oath-taking ceremony. We are thrilled as a department to have each of you here today. Your presence makes this ceremony, this occasion, meaningful and truly special. We are honored to share the afternoon with you. And then also, with that being said, I would like to welcome our colleagues and the colleagues as well as partners from the clinical training sites. And if I can start from straight ahead of me, Mrs. Amoa, Mrs. Luningo, then I'll hop, skip and jump to Mr. Screechy, the colleagues from Cecilia Makiwane, you are welcomed. The colleagues from Livingston Hospital, Mr. Keteldas, we have Mrs. Hansen, and then from Dora and Ginza Hospital, we have Mrs. Keteldas. You are also welcomed. Thank you very much. To the colleagues from the faculty, specifically the School of Clinical Care Sciences, Mr. Masebe, you are welcome, sir. He is representing the HOD from pharmacy. Thank you very much. Then to all of the academics from the Department of Radiography, and Mrs. Conley sitting at the back there, our event organizer, you are welcomed. And then to our colleagues behind the scenes, Mr. Hulzer, Mr. Mtego, Mr. Erasmus, Mr. Besaidenout, thank you. You are welcomed as well. And then last but not least, welcome to all the final year radiography students. We are here because of you this afternoon. So allow me to just share the last bit with all of you, fourth year specifically. You are going to be making a promise this afternoon, giving almost like a declaration that you are going to be taking in front of all of us present here today. So please make it meaningful and be mindful of what it is that you are committing to, okay, when you take this oath. Thank you once again for joining us, and welcome everyone.
So you're going to take the second last flight before you leave us and immigrate to the world of work. But to put you on that flight, I'm calling on Mrs. Edwards to do an opening prayer.
Good afternoon, everybody. May I ask you to bow your heads in prayer? Dear Lord, today I invoke your presence here and to seek your guidance. And I also ask, Lord, for these students to open up their minds so that they may grow passionately in love with their profession, and never to forget that this is just the beginning of the road, the beginning of their journey, and that each day will be a new day with new challenges, and prepare them, Lord, for those times as they journey along. We ask this through Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
So now you've been put on the flight safely. So now it's time for the onboard entertainment so that you can be kept busy. And I will call Mr. Campbell forward to address you with his speech entitled 3 Peas in a Pod.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Dr. van der Venter, it will be the first time that I will have been referred to as the entertainment. Normally in class, I'm referred to by other things that one can perhaps not speak about openly, and particularly not on a recorded message like this afternoon. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular honor to speak to you this afternoon. Thank you again for the colleagues that have joined us, and in particular, the class of 2024. And so, whenever I look at a cohort of students, my thoughts, in particular final year students, my thoughts are projected into the future. Because then I ask myself what the state of the profession is like. And to get a sense of what it is like, I look at the final year group of students. And so, like Mr. Nelson Mandela, I would like to say to you, it is in your hands. And I'm confident that you will not disappoint me. So go out there and represent yourself well, represent your family well, and represent the institution well. And so, as Dr. van der Venter said, my talk to you this afternoon is about 3 P's in a pod. Now, I'm sure when you heard the title of the speech, it may have filled you with a bit of puzzlement. Yes, I've taken poetic license to extend the expression, the English expression, of 2 peas in a pod. And I've extended that to 3 peas in a pod. And so the first P in my pod, ladies and gentlemen, is that of people, or person, if you like. And so I would argue that the very reason that we decided to become radiographers was to serve people, not so. There may be another very important reason as well why we decided to become radiographers. It could well have been because of the very generous salary that radiographers are paid. But I want to confine myself this afternoon to the people. And so as radiographers, ladies and gentlemen, class of 2024, we need to see people, our patients, not as an X-ray examination, and I'm sure class of 2024 will be reminded of my refrain in class, that we should not see them as an X-ray examination, but that we should see them as a unique individual, an individual with fears and hopes, and yes, an individual that we should give dignified care to. And so this person should not be a lumbar spine, but this person should be Mrs. Kumalo with lower back pain and in need of a set of radiographs to aid the medical doctor in making a diagnosis. We must understand the vulnerability of Mrs. Kumalo as she lies on our X-ray table. Yes, Mrs. Kumalo may be anxious. Mrs. Kumalo may be fearful. And Mrs. Kumalo may indeed be in physical discomfort. And therefore, ours is not just to focus on the technical quality of the images that we produce, but we should consider Mrs. Khumalo's experience as we attend to her. And so, yes, I would like to say that we need to treat Mrs. Khumalo with empathy and look at her as an individual and not just as a patient with medical needs. So, class of 2024, I urge you to take time to listen to your patients and reassure them whilst they are in that vulnerable state. And here I want to invoke the literature, because the literature seems to suggest that radiographers have a hit-and-run relationship with their patients. But even in that fleeting moment, I want you to understand the impact, the long-lasting impact that you may have on Mrs. Khumalo and the like. And of course, you won't only interact with Mrs. Khumalo, but you may be called upon to examine Auntie Moira Jacobs, Peter Botha, Mr. Thomas Odiambo, or indeed Madame Elise Dupont. So my argument is, ladies and gentlemen, our people-centeredness should be inclusive and sensitive of all the cultures, because we live in a diverse world, and we should therefore be mindful and respectful of all the variations in our community. So, ladies and gentlemen, the first P is that of people. Put that in your pod. The second P I would like to draw your attention to, ladies and gentlemen, is one called protection. And I think it comes as no surprise to the fourth year class that this particular lecturer will talk about protection. And it should not surprise you. It will, I suppose, not surprise you, Dr. van der Venter, because you were my supervisor. Because radiation, and ionizing radiation for that matter, is the one thing that sets us apart, as radiographers, sets us apart from other healthcare professionals. And this ionizing radiation can, of course, be beneficial to the patient. But you'll agree with me, it can also be harmful. And so we are called upon to fraternize with ionizing radiation in a responsible manner, in a manner that seeks to protect our patient at all times. I'm sure you don't want a lecture on radiation protection this afternoon, and I have no intention of giving you such a lecture. However, what I want to do is I want to appeal to your sense of morality. And so morality in my book would mean the set of values and principles that you have that allows you to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong. And so this afternoon, I'm going to leave you with 4 such values that I have extracted from publication 138 of the International Commission on Radiological Protection, the ICRP documentation. And as I turn over the page, I need to remind you that it is the second of 35 pages. So bear with me. And so the 4 values that I've extracted from the ICRP publication 138 published in 2018. The first value is that of beneficence and non-maleficence. Now you know, because I know that you are taught that in first year already. Beneficence, if I could remind you, and perhaps the other radiographers who have qualified a long time ago, is to do good. And so this afternoon, as you engage with radiation and ionizing radiation in particular, that you will do good to your patients. Non-maleficence, on the other hand, is do no harm. And so when you're doing good, you are making sure that your patient is shielded. And not shielded sometimes, but shielded all the time. Non-maleficence means not to do any harm. And so when an examination is requested, it is your responsibility as a radiographer to make sure that that examination is indeed justified. And if you believe that it is not justified, it is your responsibility to engage the clinician and to question them, because you ought to be the advocate of your patient. And so do no harm. The second value that I would want to leave with you is that of prudence. And prudence suggests that we should make well-informed decisions, carefully considered decisions, despite not knowing the extent of your action. Now, as we sit here, all radiographers this afternoon, no one can tell exactly to what extent a gonad shield protects the patient. Nobody can determine to what extent a collimated beam protects the patient. Nobody can determine to what extent a higher kilovoltage and a lower MAS protects the patient. But we know that it does. And whether we know exactly how it does it, we should be prudent in the way in which we apply those things. And so this afternoon, class of 2024, I would like to call upon you to be prudent in the way in which you use ionizing radiation. The third value is that of justice, which suggests that you should be fair to your patients. And I would like to say, protect all your patients. And I've capitalized all, I've underlined it, and I've written it in bold. So protect all patients. Because there is a notion somehow amongst radiographers that I should only protect those that are of childbearing age. It is a myth. It is wrong. It is unjust. You should protect all your patients. Whether the patient is young, more so, and whether the patient is old, doesn't matter. Because can I remind you and can I give you one fact that you can perhaps go and chew on as you leave this venue? There is something referred to as the so-called LNT hypothesis, the linear no threshold hypothesis, which in fact is a theory that suggests that any exposure, and I mean any exposure, whether it be 70 and 2.5 or 125 and 30, God forbid, any exposure may give rise to stochastic effects. And whether your patient is 1 month old or 70 years old, that patient must be protected because it is just to do so. And so the last one, ladies and gentlemen, is that of dignity, that we should treat all our patients with respect, irrespective of their age, their gender, their ethnicity, or their social status. So the second P, because it's so important, I'm going to repeat it. The second P goes with 4 values: beneficence, non-maleficence, prudence, justice, and dignity. Class of 2024, I pray that you would put that in your backpack and that you'll carry it around wherever you go. Whether you find yourself in a tertiary hospital or whether you find yourself in a primary healthcare center in some small place, please apply those principles. Do what is right. And what is right is to protect your patients. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, the third P in my pod is that of posterity. And so posterity in my book means the decisions that we make today, what impact does it have on future generations? And so this afternoon, as you are about to leave the hallowed halls of this educational institution, I would want to appeal to you. But firstly, before you leave, the November 2024 exams have to validate you first. And so as you leave these hallowed halls, I would like to appeal to you that you commit yourself to the following 2 decisions for posterity's sake, for the sake of future generations of students, future generations of radiographers. I would want you to commit yourself to 2 things this afternoon. Firstly, I would want you to commit that I will be the best mentor that I can possibly be. I do not want to rehash our discussions in class in front of the people that you work with, but you know exactly what those discussions are about. And so this afternoon I'm asking you to be that better person that will go out into a radiography department and that will understand that posterity requires of us to think about our students, because they will be the next generation of radiographers. So for posterity's sake, class of 2024, I would want you to say that I will be the best mentor that I can possibly be. And then commit yourself to radiation safety for the sake of your patients, but also to model the best practice to students that you will mentor. Commit yourself to be patient and approachable with your students, to create a conducive learning environment for them. Show empathy and understanding by being sensitive to the concerns and the difficulties that your students may experience. And then commit yourself as the radiographer. Commit yourself to professionalism and integrity so that you instill in your students the importance of high standards in the way in which you conduct yourself. So that's the first commitment that I would like that you would make for posterity's sake, for the sake of future generations. The second commitment that I would like you to make is that I will be a lifelong learner. I will be a lifelong learner. And yes, the HPCSA regulates us to some extent. It requires of you to accumulate certain number of continuing education units. And so if you don't acquire those numbers, the HPCSA will deal with you in particular ways. I must admit, I've just seen a communique the other day where they said that we are now about to clamp down on professionals who do not comply with the regulations of the HPCSA. I've also read a stat, and I'm not sure if it is up to date, but I read a stat that less than 50% of radiographers are compliant in terms of the CPD requirements. Now that is a crazy statistic to read. But apart from the HPCSA regulation, I want to hold you to a higher standard here this afternoon. I am not asking you to just accumulate the number of points that are required by the regulator. I want to hold you to a higher standard. I want to hold you to a higher standard because your students, the patients, and fellow healthcare professionals that you will work with require a radiographer with expert knowledge and give guidance to them. And so this afternoon, I want to hold you to a higher standard, and I want to say a Bachelor of Radiography is not sufficient. A lifelong learner will seek to improve those qualifications. And so the profession needs you to do that, because the profession requires the next generation of lecturers. The profession requires the next generation of thinkers and the next generation of researchers. So this afternoon, as a lifelong learner, I would want you to say that the Bachelor of Radiography is but the start of my educational journey. Well, finally, ladies and gentlemen, my 3 P's in a pod are people, protection, and posterity. And just like the expression 2 peas in a pod refers to how similar people may be, I would like to argue that the 3 P's that I've put before you are also very similar, and they certainly do belong in one pod. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. So I hope you've collected your P's and put it in your pocket. Huh? Please remember where you put it. So before you can get off this flight, you first have to do some admin to get your passport stamped at immigration. And that is to read the oath and make the promise, right? So your voice is your signature this time, not the physical one we always fight about. Okay? And to do that, I'm going to call Mrs. Haley Hodgson, to lead this. And how this is going to work is Mrs. H is going to read a part and then you'll repeat it after her. Please remember to read your own name, right? Not when she says you read your name, you say read your name. Read your own name. And then that's how it's going to go. Mrs. H?
Okay, has everyone taken their oath out of the envelope? Okay, please have, can you stand? Okay, just as Dr. van der Vente explained, I'm going to read a paragraph and then I will signal to you to please read your oath. Okay. In the presence of family, friends, educators and colleagues, I, your name, take this oath as a radiography graduate of the Nelson Mandela University. I swear to uphold the oath of radiographers and to practice my profession faithfully.
In the presence of family, friends, educators and colleagues, I, and Mr. Janet, take this oath as a radiographer graduate of the Nelson Mandela University. I swear to uphold the oath of radiographers and to practice my profession faithfully.
I shall practice the profession of radiography in the service of humanity.
I shall practice the profession of radiography in the service of humanity.
I shall cooperate with people in other disciplines to promote and maintain health dialogue and person-centered care.
I shall cooperate with people in other disciplines to promote and maintain health dialogue and person-centered care.
I shall use radiography equipment and accessories consistent with the purpose for which it is designed and employ procedures and techniques appropriately.
I shall use radiography equipment and accessories consistent with the purpose for which it is designed and employ procedures and techniques appropriately.
I shall respect all my patients, irrespective of characteristics such as age, disease, disability, creed, ethnic origin, gender, nationality, political affiliation, race, sexual orientation, social standing, or any other characteristic.
I shall respect all my patients irrespective of characteristics such as age, disease, disability, creed, ethnic origin, gender, nationality, political affiliation, race, sexual orientation, social standing, or any other characteristics.
I shall respect the autonomy of my patients, including obtaining their informed consent for investigations, and respect confidences entrusted to me in the course of professional practice.
I shall respect the autonomy of my patients, including obtaining their informed consent for investigations, and respect confidences entrusted to me in the course of professional practice.
I shall demonstrate expertise as a custodian of radiation protection to minimize radiation exposure to the patient, self, the healthcare team, and the public.
I shall demonstrate expertise as a custodian of radiation protection to minimize radiation exposure to the patient, self, the healthcare team, and the public.
I shall respect the scientific gains of those radiographers in whose steps I walk and maintain and elevate the standard of my profession by improving my knowledge and competencies, by participating in continued education and professional activities, and by sharing knowledge with colleagues and students.
I shall respect the scientific gains of those radiographers in whose steps I walk and maintain and elevate the standard of my profession by improving my knowledge and competencies, by participating in continuing education and professional activities,
I shall always uphold the Radiography Code of Conduct and endeavour to defend my professional independence against any form of malpractice.
I shall always uphold the Radiography Code of Conduct and endeavour to defend my professional independence against any form of malpractice.
I endeavour to fulfil this declaration solemnly, freely, and upon my honour.
I endeavour to fulfil this declaration solemnly, freely, and upon my honour.
Thank you. I think you need a round of applause. Well done. Thank you. Have a seat, I think. Yes.
So now that you've done the administration for immigration to get that stamp in your passport, we are going to near the end of the flight, and I'm going to call Mrs. Marilyn Hutton-Willemse to do the closing.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me? The short person is going to speak now. Okay, guys, I just want to say thank you very much for everybody that made the effort to come. This morning when I heard the rain and I'm thinking it's the oath-taking ceremony, I just thought that we just choose the worst dates for our ceremonies, eh? But thank you very much for the effort that everybody has gone through. As Mrs. Amawa said, Mrs. Luningo came there just after 4 this morning to pick her up, and that is commitment. Thank you very much. That is a very good virtue to have, Mrs. Luningo, your commitment to always want to be present at our OSCEs and then also at the oath-taking ceremony at the end of the year. That's lovely. I also want to just say thank you to your fellow colleagues, Mrs. Amawa and Mr. Scritchy, for joining us, traveling all the way from East London. I hope that in the future you will continue to do so. And then also not forgetting my colleagues from PE, the Livingston and the Doranginza colleagues of mine. Being here show us that you are committed to the students and their progression to the next level. Then I want to say thank you to my colleagues. Thank you so much for always being available. I think that we do take this very seriously. And I also want to thank Mrs. Connolly that every time that we have this event, she runs around like a headless chicken, but she still looks beautiful. Thank you so much, Mrs. Connolly, for always being so committed, for ensuring that the students are happy with what they receive. Not just today, but always. That is just how Mrs. Connolly does it. Thank you, Mr. Campbell, for the lovely reminder of why we are doing radiography. You know, when Mr. Campbell said, when you are working as a qualified radiographer, you must kind of take a step back. And, myself as a radiographer, I always find that we are always so in a rush to get through our patients. I had one student this afternoon, or was it this morning, that positioned so fast, and I just had to laugh and think, why are we always in a rush? We don't take the time. When I started, and I don't want to go very long, guys, but I just have to say, because it actually connects nicely with what Mr. Campbell said. When I started assessing students on the clinical platform as a Nelson Mandela University lecturer, I always said to them, and I think that Nossi will remember that, once you have examined a patient, when you say goodbye to the patient that exits that X-ray room must not be the same patient that entered the room, because you must make a difference to that patient's feeling. We all know how it is to be a patient. I'm sure you all have been a patient at some point. It is not a nice experience. One of my patients today said, how painful it is when they put that image receptor under your knee it goes against your skin. So imagine us doing numerous examinations on a patient that has just been in an accident. Guys, it is not a comfortable experience. So please take your time with the patients. Mrs. Williams will remember this one radiographer, I'm not going to mention names, but when this radiographer went to work overseas in the UK, they told her, you don't need to rush like that. You can take your time. And I'm not going to mention names further, but just by saying that, Mrs. Williams and I, we trained at the same hospital. And we were trained by this radiographer. So we were part of that, can I say sausage factory? We just want to get through the patients. But it was a very busy hospital, right? It still is, and that is just how we work. But please, let this be the start of a new generation, where you actually take your time and apply what you have learned, looking at the person, protecting them, ensuring that you create a change within them. This is a small seed that you're starting, and hopefully you can inspire others. Those qualified radiographers that qualified 30 years ago with me, more than 30 years ago, make sure that you inspire them to change their attitude towards the patient so that they don't see them as the lumbar spine, the skull, the chest, the finger, the CT. They don't see them as that. See them as a human being that is a mother, a father, a brother to that child that's sitting on the bench waiting, wondering what is wrong with my parent. Okay, we are all human beings. We will all be going through some kind of illness, one way or another, during our life as a human being on this earth. So, with that being said, I just want to say thank you, colleagues, for always being here for us. Thank you to the students also it was a lovely journey. Some of you I've known for more than 4 years. Most of you I've known for 4 years. And it was a different experience because we met under very unusual circumstances once again. During the COVID period, that is when we met. We met online. We didn't even meet in person. So we have a very special relationship, right? And I wish just the best for all of you so that you will be that different radiographer that comes back, knock on our door via email and say, I would like to progress to the next level. I don't want to just be a bachelor of radiography. I want to continue my education because amongst you, there will definitely be some leaders in radiography. Maybe not on the academic platform, but going forward. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by not wanting to study. I took many years to start studying in radiography again, and it was one of the most enjoyable things to do. I think as a senior student, you enjoyed even more than so you've covered your bases now. So I'm wishing you the best of luck for your future. And on your way out, guys, Mrs. Conley is sitting on the end there. You must please just grab your goodie bags. Okay? Thank you so much.
So as we close and ready to leave the flight, the economic class is going to leave first and the business class will wait until economic class leaves. So if I could ask that you all rise for the academic procession to leave. the back.